This is the nation's capital sports show where it's most definitely on. I'm your host, Vincent Charles. Alongside me, Avsheen Banab, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangaz. Gentlemen, let's talk about what we love talking about the most, and that's sports in the DMV and beyond. Speaking of the DMV, the Washington Nationals. Steven Strasburg, he's been the ace for the last few years. Max Scherzer comes in, he gets the nod on opening day. Is this a message to Strasburg to get it in gear? Is he going to have his breakout season? Avsheen.
I don't know if he'll have his breakout season. He had a decent season, not necessarily in the win or loss column, Vincent, but in the strikeouts. Yep. He led the National League with 242 strikeouts last year. If it were me, I'd still make him my opening day starter, but I can see why they gave Max Scherzer the call to start on opening day with that big, huge contract. They have something to prove.
A few million reasons.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that if you're going to pay a guy $30 million a year over average, and the way he's pitched the last couple of years for Detroit, I think he makes sense as the starter for opening day.
Yeah, he's pitched really well for Detroit those 2 years. Now he's got to come in and prove it in the National League, right, Stephen? This is very different than the American League. So
not even just the fact that he's the opening day starter, Strasburg's not, but from what I've seen the rotation so far, Strasburg's now going to be the third, and Jordan Zimmerman is going to be the second starter in the rotation, which is interesting considering he's got the expiring contract. Right. Are they going to trade him? Is he going to walk? Are they going to be able to get something done before the season starts, which seems unlikely? And he's already said, let's shelf contract talks until after the season.
Yeah, that's a big step, too. You make a really good point about Jordan Zimmerman. I mean, it's a great starting pitching staff that they have right now. I don't know about the hitting. That's a whole other story.
You can't go wrong with any of the five,
no.
really. I mean,
on paper, you can't.
Yeah, on paper, you can't.
You know, but we'll see what happens with Jordan Zimmerman, Vincent, because, you know, his contract, I don't know what they're going to do with him, but they've got to figure out what to do with that big ace.
And you know what? Strikeouts aside, when I look at the Nationals over the last couple of years, while all the hype has been on Strasburg, I don't know that he is any better right now than the third best pitcher on the team, based on, you know, Scherzer coming in and based on what Jordan Zimmerman, who most people have conceded he's been their best pitcher the last 2 years.
Yeah, he's definitely been the most consistent over the last couple of years.
And last year, Fister was incredible as well. And you talk about that guy being your fifth in the rotation because you're going to stick Gio, the lefty, in there at fourth. And then, yeah, you're going to be able to have that as your fifth. It's really strong.
Fister could be a second or third on most teams, Vincent.
Absolutely.
Yes, it sounds right now like Strasburg is taking it in stride, but being a competitive athlete, you know that Strasburg, in the back of his mind, that has given him some motivation to do as well or better than Scherzer. But I did hear that both pitchers are getting along pretty well. If you're just tuning in, this is the nation's capital sports show where it's most definitely on. This is AIM via Comcast 69 and Fios 38. Gentlemen, early on, the Nationals have some injuries. What's this hold for the early going?
Well, you've got Rendon, who's a major asset to this team. Yeah. He's out. Worth, another major asset, he comes out of the outfield, and he's hurt right now. Nate McLouth, off of who basically comes off the bench, but he's their number one man who comes off the bench. Help me, gentlemen. I think I'm missing one more person in here.
Span.
Denard Span, who Michael Taylor looks like he will be filling in for him on opening day. Those are three.
Probably the whole month of April.
Probably, yeah. And those are three huge losses right now, especially the Rendon one, because I am a huge fan of his. I think this guy is going to go somewhere.
Well, one thing we're going to find out if Mike Rizzo is as good a general manager as he said, because they've been talking about all this stuff about all the guys they've had at the minor league, either at Syracuse or Harrisburg. So now, starting out the season, we're going to find out if these other guys can play or not.
Particularly, I'm excited to see Michael Taylor play center field because I think if you talk about those injuries, Span may be the first one to leave his position down the road, whether it's due to injury, retirement, or contract deals. So that will be exciting to see that during the first month, but it's definitely going to be a loss. And then Rendon, hopefully he's ready for opening day, maybe mid-April, as his injury is sore knee.
And so we'll see,
should come back. But I think Rendon is quickly becoming the most valuable infielder on the Nationals.
Oh, he definitely, you gotta say, right? He's the best infielder on the National squad. Among the starters right now. And
yeah, I believe so.
I'd like to see the 15-year-old Michael Taylor see what he can do. He looks like he's 15.
It's
he
true.
looks like a young fellow, but I'd like to see what he's going to do. He's real quick out there, so that's a big asset.
And he got a little bit of time last year at the end of the year during that 10-game winning streak, even with the ice buckets at the. I can recall that,
Right.
so that was fun to watch. Maybe we'll get another one of those.
I am interested in Michael Taylor. They say he's got all the tools. Some people even predict that now that he's getting his chance, he may move Span right out of the starting position. So that has yet to be determined. But Michael Taylor, they're certainly high on him. You can catch the Nation's Capital Sports Show on Facebook or at facebook.com/TNCSS. Let's go to the NCAAs, gentlemen. Kentucky had a close one last night. Notre Dame almost pulled it off. Gonzaga, they look good, but as we speak, they're playing Duke right now. That's going to be a tough game. Wisconsin Badgers, they're shooting the lights out of the ball, and they got some size. They're definitely a team that's got to be considered.
Yeah, going into this tournament, most people would say if there's anybody that can knock Kentucky off out of that side, it would be Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Well, now they're going to meet in the Final Four,
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens. Kentucky was almost knocked out by Notre Dame. Would have been a great finish had Grant made that shot.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Wisconsin is a team that a lot of people believe could really knock off Kentucky. So we'll have to see what happens.
The problem I see for anybody going against Kentucky now is that Notre Dame game made Kentucky stronger in my mind. To have to do that and have to get down to the wire and make the 2 foul shots in order to get back up, that's going to make them stronger. They've been there now. They've had the test. So
Yeah.
they're going to come back ready for anybody.
And they've had the
next
test, too,
round.
during the season. I mean, I remember the LSU game where
they've
they had...
definitely had their test. But
so they know.
through the rest of the tournament, it had been pretty easy for
Yes,
them.
it has been.
Well, as we
Chris.
just said, as we taped the show, the Gonzaga-Duke game is happening, so we don't know how that's going to come. But I'll tell you something. I'm a believer in Tom Izzo, and I think Michigan State really has the players that could match up with Kentucky. If everybody left, I don't really think Wisconsin would match up that well with Kentucky. Duke, they don't have anybody to stop Okafor if they should play Duke. I don't think Kentucky would have as much a problem with Gonzaga, but Michigan State and Tom Izzo knows how to play in these games, and I just think Izzo and that Michigan State team, especially on the roll they are, they beat my poor ACC now twice, knocking off first Virginia and now Louisville is the latest, and I just think. Michigan State could give them a good run if it gets that far.
I'll tell you what, about a month ago, if we were talking about the tournament before it,
Yeah.
no one here, I don't think anyone would have selected Michigan State to even be in the tournament, let alone the Final Four. But
I would have.
But you would have taken Michigan? You
I would
have had them in the
have
tournament?
had them in the tournament.
Because Izzo, I'm a Tom Izzo fan. Most people know I'm a Big Ten guy. Like most people know you're an ACC
Yeah.
guy, and he does it year in and year out, no matter what kind of talent he has. And that kid Trice, that's Kentucky's. He could be Kentucky's Achilles heel if they meet. That kid Trice from Michigan State is the real deal.
Yeah.
Whatever happens today in the final game, we're assured that Final Four is going to be a good one.
Always.
I'd like to mention the Maryland Lady Terps. How about those ladies?
Well, hey, Maryland has perhaps, they have one of the premier, other than Connecticut, they have probably, Connecticut's in a class by itself. But in that next tier, there's Maryland is probably right up there, if not the head of that next tier. And so, Brenda Free, she does a great job with that team. And I expect them to be in the ladies' Final Four. Probably be the ones that will play Connecticut.
Probably, and I'd like to see that matchup too, because I think that would be an awesome one.
That would be good.
Yeah, definitely. Maryland's really good, and she's like Tom Izzo, Brenda Frese, consistently in the tournament, consistently going a long way, Vincent.
You can listen to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on TuneIn Radio at tunein.com. Let's go to the Washington Capitals, guys. The Caps, they had a 4-day break. And that's the first question I wanted to bring out is, at this point of the season, was that 4-day break positive or negative for this team? Now, they're still looking at a wild card spot. And they have a few tough games coming down the road with contenders. I think they have to win at least half of their remaining games.
Yeah, they came off of a big break. They barely got by the New Jersey Devils, I believe it was. Then they lost to Nashville, and then now their most recent game, they did win, which was good. And they're up
against the
the New York
Division-leading Rangers.
Division-leading New York Rangers, who's one of the best teams in the NHL, especially since they made their trades at the trade deadline about 2 months ago.
Right.
We said this a few months ago. They've got to get between 90 and 95 points to guarantee a spot in the playoffs.
Right.
And I think right now they're at 92 as of this broadcast.
Yeah, that's what we expected for them when we said, what do we expect them to get? And we said on the top end, that's where they would be. So they're really almost exceeding expectations at this point, which is good.
Well, speaking of exceeding expectations, this is our resident
Caps guy.
Capitals guy. We go to him. So I've got to take my dig at the Caps because I think it's interesting that Barry Trotz left Nashville.
Yeah.
And now
Okay,
Nashville's got
I knew
one
it was
of the
gonna
better
come from you.
records in the NHL. And now he's with the Caps. And though they're doing well, I mean, it look like they're going to make the playoffs. But if they don't make the playoffs, boy, you're going to hear it from me.
Yeah, they better make the playoffs, and they got to do something better than the first round. They got to do better
can't
than
be one and out.
They can't be one and out, Vincent.
And if you're keeping up with Alex Ovechkin, 49 goals right now, looking good.
Oh yeah, he'll another year where he's going to.
Yeah.
I think we can safely say break the 50-point mark.
Yeah.
50-goal mark.
The Washington Wizards, they've had their third losing streak of 4 games or more. Right now, if they get into the playoffs, it's looking like they're going to limp
Oh, they'll
in.
be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They haven't been executing as well. They've had some defensive lapses. What's your take, guys?
Well, I think the beginning part of the season they beat up on a lot of teams that they should have beat, and so as we've gotten to the All-Star break and teams on the backside, they started to play some really tougher teams. But the thing, I hate to say this, though I'm going to say it because the thing is always the coach whenever a team doesn't play well. But I think Randy Whitman made a mistake, right when they were doing good, that when they would lose those games, he seemed to trash the team at times about what they're doing. Now, when they kind of need he's giving them tender love when he probably needs to have a foot up there behind, so to speak, because they really are struggling. And I don't think he's going to even be back unless they get a run to get to the second round. I think Whitman will be out of here, the second or third day after the season ends.
Yeah, Chris stole my thunder. I didn't have a chance to chime in on the last show we did, but I know we talked about Whitman, but I don't think he'll be back either, Vincent. I think it's time that they get some other kind of guy in who can really put a fire under their feet and make them go, because he's got to go a long way in the playoffs.
I think we all agree that. I think we're all in agreement to that point. But at the same time, I still do think he deserved to get the chance this year. Right. He just hasn't.
Definitely.
He just hasn't taken that chance and run with it the way that he could have. In my mind, it's a little upsetting because at least I wanted a buffer year for that KD16 campaign. They're setting up, waiting to pick somebody and find a coach to try and campaign to get him there.
And I got to steal your thunder just for a second because you
ahead.
mentioned KD16.
Yeah.
And now he's got this foot graft. Now I don't know if we really want KD16. When you're a basketball player and you have a foot injury, those are the kinds of things that slow you down and you're never quite the same. So it's going to be an interesting 4 to 6 months for Kevin Durant to see how this turns out.
Yeah, I think some of the Kevin Durant, the people on that wagon train, some of them might jump off right now due to this injury. Getting back to the schedule, they had an easy schedule at the beginning of the season. 6 out of the last 10 games are against teams with losing records. So that may be in their favor, and I'm going to have to go against you guys. I'm still up in the air about Coach Whitman. I want to wait and see how the season pans out.
Yeah, they have a chance to make a move, I guess, right now in the standings. I think right now if the playoffs were to start with a few games remaining in the regular season, they'd end up playing the Toronto Raptors, I believe. And
who themselves are not playing really well.
And they actually, Toronto would get the home court advantage as they are the 4 seed and Washington right now is the 5 seed. But it would be nice if they could at least flip-flop with the Raptors.
That would be nice, yeah. And going back to the Whitman, the one thing that I'd like to see during this end of the season and going into the playoffs, particularly basketball standpoint, is some better set plays. That's where I think Whitman has been failing. If we're going to talk about what the problem is the offense is just really there's not much there. There's,
Well, they better get
there's
to
not a
work.
lot of plan that's going into
No.
it at the moment.
They better get to work.
Coming back after the jump, we're going to be talking more baseball, the DC United, and Washington Redskins. This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. I'm Vincent Charles with Avseen Benab, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangaz. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. I'm Vincent Charles with Avseen Benab, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangaz. What I didn't mention at the beginning of the show, Kevin Jeter is not here with us. He's away on assignment, but here in spirit. Now we're going to throw a few subjects out on our topics called All Sorts of Sports. First topic, Pete Rose. Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred has made a statement that he's going to try to make a compromise with Pete Rose. Now, Pete Rose has approached the commissioner and said that he would like to be reconsidered for the Hall of Fame. And what I'm hearing from the commissioner is he will reconsider Pete for the Hall of Fame, but still try to keep him out of baseball-related activities. What's your take on that, guys?
I think he should have been reinstated for the Hall of Fame ballot years ago. I think it's amazing to me that you can look at what Pete Rose did and banish him for a lifetime. Then you can see what possibly Bonds and Sosa and McGuire and still at least have them on the ballot, and people were still voting for them the last two Hall of Fame ballots. Pete Rose should be there. Pete Rose has done a lot for the game of baseball on the field. I don't know, Chris, how you feel about it, but I honestly think if you're going to put those other guys on the ballot, then he should definitely be there too.
I think that Pete Rose should probably be on the ballot. I don't think he should have ever been removed from the ballot, but I feel very strongly, absolutely, he should be banned from baseball for the rest of his life. He wore a uniform representing the Cincinnati Reds as a manager, and the number one cardinal rule in baseball, it's the number one cardinal rule that's even more important. You can murder somebody, you can be on steroids. The number one rule, the thing on every locker and every baseball locker room you go to is about betting on baseball. He was arrogant about it, he bet, and then he spent the next 15 years throwing people under the bus to cover his lie. He should never be back in the game in any kind of way, but he should be on the ballot, as should Shoeless Joe Jackson.
He should definitely be on the ballot. I mean, that's way too long. You're talking about Pete Rose. Shoeless Joe is way too past his time. He should be on there as well. I agree with a lot of what you said. He was a big liar for 15 years in front of the world. He lied. But I'm just saying the other guys, too, if they are going to be on it, he has
as
every
if
right
the
to be
guys
on
that
it,
did
too.
the performance-enhancing drugs
Right.
weren't lying in front of the world or in courts.
I think A-Rod did it,
Yeah.
Palmeiro did it, they all did it.
Yeah.
By the
You
way,
know.
if I was in that situation, I would have lied too. That's beside the point. The point is that I don't think he should be back.
Maybe
but I
just
do
not.
agree with the panel here that
Yeah.
I think he should be considered for Hall of Fame and let the writers vote him up or down.
And like you guys, my position is,
Yeah.
yes, I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. After all those hits, and he was Charlie Hustle.
That's the greatest nickname in sports.
But
Yeah.
the compromise is a good idea to keep him out of baseball-related activities.
If enough of the writers feel strongly enough that he shouldn't be, then
Right.
then he won't make. I mean,
That's
if he's
right.
on the
Right.
ballot, then he won't make it in. So
Yeah.
Let the writers
them
decide. Let them decide.
This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. You can listen to the Nation's Capital Sports Show on TuneIn Radio at tunein.com. DC United, they won their last game. It's early. They haven't played very many. What do we have?
Oh, well, they're 2-1. They just come off a big win against the champion, the MLS champion, LA Galaxy. And, it is early, but you've got to start out of the gate to win in this league. There's so many more games to come down the road. So if they were started out bad, you might have a little bit to worry about. But so far, so good. They came out okay, decently.
And what's my rule of thumb all the time on just about anything is win your home games.
Win your home
So
games.
far, they've had 2 home games. They won them. They lost their 1 road game when they went to play New York Red Bulls up in Harrison, New Jersey. But it's a good start to the season. You take 6 points out of 3
Right.
games.
I'm looking to. I want to see what happens. They play Orlando, I think, next.
Orlando
had
next.
60,000. One of the two new teams in MLS. They had 60,000 show up their first game. So I think they go down to Orlando, I believe.
Yeah, down to Orlando.
Yeah, I want to see what kind of
That should be
fans show up
interesting.
there and
Yeah.
how DC United reacts to another
Yeah.
40, 50, 60,000 fans.
Well, I don't know if you have that many. They had 60,000 at first and 30,000
Yeah.
at second. But I think the standard crowd for Orlando this year will be between 20 and 30, which I have to say is far better than what DC United.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, you know, as a guy that followed that team and actually covered that team as a credentialed media member when they first started in '96 and did that, including some shows on AIM going up to 2000. It's kind of sad to see now that, you know, they struggle to get 11 or 12,000 at RFK.
Hopefully a new stadium will change that. If that all works out, 60,000, 30,000, that means 15,000 for the game, right?
Well, I think they'll do better than 15,000.
they will.
Orlando's really excited about that team.
They are. But if a new stadium, don't you think will bring in some
I do.
new people?
I do, certainly.
At least the first couple years?
I think if it's done right in the first couple years, it potentially could bring some. And I think they need some sensible ticket prices. You know, I'm getting kind of sidetracked here about DC United, but I do want to bring this point up because one of the things that I think has hurt DC United's attendance when you look back when they first started in '96 through 2000. And before the stadium was converted to a baseball stadium, they had a lot of tickets behind the goal, like 10 or 12, and a lot of families, especially Hispanic families, could bring their kids to a game, you know, $50 to get 4 people in. Now they want to charge $25, and you know how I love soccer more than anything else. And I refuse, if anybody from DC United is listening, I'm not going to pay $25 or $30 to walk up and watch a DC United game when I can pay 10 or 15 and watch a Nationals game. Not going to do it. So when they get this new stadium, they need to reasonably set their ticket prices to get people to come. But if they keep asking for more money, I don't know how many more they're going to get.
I think if they keep those tickets reasonable, there'll be a novelty effect early on. You know, the tourists, people that come to Washington, D.C., one of their stops is going to be the new D.C. United Stadium. But we all know, just like Camden Yards, you couldn't get a ticket those first few years. But if you don't win, the crowds are going to drop off.
That's right.
The Washington Redskins, they have 3 quarterbacks signed for training camp. Now, the top brass says if Marcus Mariota is available, they're going to take him. Now, do you guys honestly think there could be a trade in the works where RG3 is gone and they bring in Mariota, or is this a bargaining chip for the Redskins if they have a chance to get Mariota, get that pick that maybe by trading it away, they can get some good young stars?
I think it's wishful thinking and not wishful thinking to draft him, but wishful thinking to think that he'd even be there for a trade. I don't see Mariota going past maybe 3 or 4, most likely at 2, Tennessee, whether they take him or they use their draft pick for a trade. And I certainly think at the Redskins at 5, whether it's Mariota there or not, it should be a trade pick. They should trade down, gather some more picks, either this year a couple, and hopefully in a following year as well.
100% agree. I think if Scott McCloughan is the one who's making these decisions, they will not draft Mariota if he's there.
Right.
But I don't think he will be there. They have so many needs in the defensive backfield, on the offensive line. They need a pass rusher. There are a lot of good players. Randy Gregory comes to mind. Ray comes to mind. A lot of good players out there where they could drop down and still pick one of them up, or use a number 5 pick to get an offensive lineman or a pass rusher. Getting Mariota would be stupid. It would be stupid. You got 3 quarterbacks.
Well, from my perspective, you know, if I was a Redskin fan, and you know I'm not, I would hope that their new general manager would never pick Mariota even if he's available, because the last great quarterback to come out of Oregon was Dan Fouts. And that was years ago. And I think if you look at system quarterbacks, every quarterback that comes out of Oregon in the Chip Kelly era and even before, once they got drafted, you know, by the NFL, they just never worked out. And while it's a good story and he seems a nice guy, the way they've painted him, I just think that he's not going to be that good a quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be any better than what RG3 has become.
as much as you guys talk about the GM making the decisions, we all know who makes the final decision.
Yeah, we do.
And
Little Danny boy.
He can surprise you, as we have seen in the past.
Oh, he always surprises us.
But I think in this instance, if you're going to say that it's going to be Dan Snyder that has some pull in it, then I think he's going to wait a little bit longer on the RG3 and the Robert Griffin train before going and jumping ship to Mariota. But maybe jersey sales of both would be so much so that might change his mind. But like I said, pointless to even talk about because Mariota probably will not be there to even consider it.
We shall see. As we conclude our show, you can catch us on our email address at info@tncss.com. You can watch the Nation's Capital Sports Show on AIM via Comcast 69 and Fios 38. And you can listen to the Nation's Capital Sports Show on TuneIn.com, Stitcher, and now iHeartRadio.
Interesting. There you go.
For Avshin Banab,
Well, wait a minute.
Chris Jerry.
Before we get out of
that
here,
time,
I see
yeah.
we got about a minute left, I'm told. So I want to bring up one thing in our All Sorts of Sports segment. Congratulations to the Aussies. Australia defeated their main rival, New Zealand, in the Cricket World Cup down under early this morning.
They did. And West Indies, you guys will be back, and you'll be back better than ever. One of these years, I expect the West Indies to be there. That's all I'm going to say about them.
This has been the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. For myself, Vincent Charles, Avshin Banab, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangaz, thank you for watching. Have a good week, and have a good sports week.
Uh-oh.